I feel just like a purple Pikmin.
Does anyone else feel like Pikmin 2 just goes on a little too long?
Admittedly, I've never actually finished Pikmin 2. I finished Pikmin 1, but never actually...
I just found myself almost just being tired of we didn't even finish the game! We were done with the game before it was actually done.
There are countless ways a sequel can follow up previous work. It can settle for more of the same, radically innovate, or hastily course-correct to cater to a different audience. Pikmin 2 tries to have its golden carrots and eat them too. Following the canon events of Pikmin 1, Olimar returns to Hakotate only to be greeted with ill news by his company president and their new employee, Louis. The president recounts Louis' story of how Hakotate Freight's golden Pikpik carrots were devoured by a so-called ravenous space bunny, forcing him to take out a massive loan and sell all their assets including the SS Dolphin in order to repay it, but to no avail, as they are still 10,100 Pokos short. In his shock, Olimar drops a bottle cap taken as a souvenir for his son, which is promptly identified as treasure by a nearby rusted ship, proclaiming it to be worth 100 Pokos. Upon hearing this, the president immediately sends Louis and Olimar back to the Pikmin planet in hopes of collecting enough treasure to pay back the remaining debt. While there are no alternate endings per se, Pikmin 2's campaign has two different conclusions. The first is when the debt of 10,000 is paid off, and Olimar accidentally departs for Hakotate without Louis. With so much content left, this ending seems premature. After the credits, the president greedily decides to go back with Olimar for the rest of the treasure and Louis. The pair find him at the bottom of the Dream Den atop a Titan Dweevil. Succeeding in arduous battle, Louis is given the title King of Bugs. With a whole treasure trove in tow, the Hakotatians leave again into space, and Olimar watches in amazement as the Pikmin begin to glow. Pikmin 2 simultaneously delivers more of the same gameplay and drastically diverges from what the original stood for. I have much to say about a few particulars, but let me start from the top. The obvious change is the addition of a second captain, and while I do miss the lonesomeness of Pikmin 1, the buddy dynamic of Olimar and Louis is appealing in its own way. However, gameplay-wise, the idea of two captains is disappointingly squandered. Past the tutorial, it's never mandated again. Only one can be controlled at a time, so players can't exactly multitask, though with practice it can be convenient to have captains watch over units on opposite sides of the map. This could have opened the door for multiplayer, but co-op is nowhere to be found, which is a baffling omission since the feature is advertised on the case and implemented in every other mode. As it stands, I mostly use Louis for punching enemies to death, plucking Pikmin faster, and minimizing backtracking by leaving in places I'm sure to return to, none of which is that important for reasons I'll get into. While the areas recycle a lot of level geometry from the original, the numerous revisions aid in making them seem unfamiliar. Where Pikmin 1 mainly consists of ponds and gardens, here we have levels representing the seasons, giving each a strong and distinct identity. Treasures don't show up on the map, so they must be found in person. However, the game does have a treasure gauge that will react when nearby them. To my dismay, the environmental puzzles are considerably weaker, with most boiling down to clearing the path of dangers before sending spoils back to ship. A lengthier process now, with the base positioned closer to the edge of the maps. Exploration is more restrictive due to added walls and elemental obstacles. It doesn't take long to be gated by water in every area, and blue Pikmin are the last to be obtained, so with the exception of Wistful Wild, the excitement of unlocking new places is somewhat short-lived, and besides, these surface locations are only about 45% of the campaign, because in Pikmin 2's biggest inclusion, each area has 3 to 4 separate underground caves, and these hold the keys to progression, another can of worms for later. Pikmin AI is improved with tighter formations, armies condensing when crossing narrow bridges, less tripping, etc. However, there are still annoying hang-ups. Not everyone will dismiss at times, causing me to press the button again. Carriers will insist on going a path I didn't plan for back to base, leaving me wishing I could dictate their route. For Pikmin type changes, yellows no longer handle bomb rocks and are instead resistant to electricity, a merciless hazard that kills instantly. While thematically consistent with the others, this lessens yellow's uniqueness and results in inferior puzzles where all that's needed is to apply the counteractive color type. The game introduces 2 new species. First is purple Pikmin, who are slow but weigh and carry 10 times more than normal, also possessing a pound move when thrown powerful enough to stun enemies. Next is the fast and poisonous white Pikmin, resistant to gases and harmful if eaten. They can also unearth buried treasure. Both types are native to certain caves and produced by sacrificing other Pikmin to their limited candy pot buds, greatly increasing their value. Another pair of resources are 2 temporary power-ups, Ultra Spicy Spray and Ultra Bitter Spray, earned by drinking their nectars or collecting a specific number of their berries from burgeoning spiderwort plants. Spicy Spray empowers a captain's squad by boosting their speed in all aspects. Bitter Spray briefly turns enemies to stone, allowing for a free beatdown, and often exploding into nectar if defeated. Rather than a journal, each day in Pikmin 2 concludes with mail from various characters back home like the President, family, and Spam, offering loads of entertaining characterization and advice. Replacing Olimar's inner thoughts is the Hakatate ship, who will constantly halt gameplay to show or explain all sorts of phenomena, including the 201 treasures. Its intrusiveness is almost similar to 5 from Skyward Sword, drawing attention to what can easily be seen and understood just by playing. Hands down, the best part of Pikmin 2 is the Piklopedia, a catalog of all treasure, plants, and wildlife, along with notes from the captains and the ability to freeze enemies and pelt them with carrots. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. The Piklopedia is a goldmine of world building and an enormous treat for anyone in love with this universe. It's also kind of neat to observe and interact with enemies in a safe environment removed from the stress of real confrontations. Here we get a sense for the staggering creature variety, even if many are just modified reskins, and I'd say learning and mastering how to combat each carries the game further than anything else. As seen throughout this video, the majority of treasures consist of man-made objects, overtly suggesting the Pikmin planet is post-apocalyptic Earth, compared to before where this is merely hinted at. Unfortunately for devout Pikmin 2 fans, the Switch release replaces all real-world brands with generic labels, and the Pikmin no longer sing Ai na Uta when 20 of each are deployed. The most impressive presentational quality is the dynamic soundtrack. Every area and cave has unique music, and there can be between 5 to 13 variations of a theme dependent on the situation, doubled by a set of offbeat versions when controlling Louis or the President. The music is undoubtedly my favorite in the series, though frustratingly it's kind of drowned out by a multitude of competing noises. I love all the new sounds in isolation, but especially for stuff like Pikmin voices, the swarm horn, treasure gauge, and low health beeping, everything adds up to a repetitive and annoying auditory experience. However, this is small potatoes next to Pikmin 2's real problems. Likely in response to criticism of the first game, players now have an infinite number of days, with no timer whatsoever in the caves. This is the single most destructive change, and that's saying a lot. The ramifications are endless the deeper I think. So many mechanics operate under the assumption that efficiency is desirable, when in reality it's not actually necessary. There are upgrades dedicated to it, Pikmin type advantages and disadvantages relating to it, and enemies designed around it, not to mention Louis' time-saving potential. Even basic tasks like building bridges, knocking down walls, engaging in combat, transporting spoils, without a timer, all these time-based systems make far less sense. Pikmin 2 fails to recognize the specialty of this gameplay by removing the main ingredient that formed the foundation, thereby enabling degenerate strategies. Pikmin 1's 30-day limit applies pressure to get stuff done. Pikmin 2 tries to do this by guilt-tripping into hurrying up through the President's emails, but it doesn't have the same effect because there really is no eventual consequence. Technically, players are free and outright encouraged to procrastinate forever, which is a shame because risking going fast uncovers many fun and skillful approaches, but without the incentive, these don't naturally manifest. Now to be fair, the game does occasionally employ elements that turn the lack of a grand deadline moot. Some creatures must be collected quickly or else they'll regenerate health. There's the endless larvae from Empress Bullblaxes, spider warts that need constant upkeep from mold and ravenous whisker pillars, respawning enemies between days, especially those like sheer grubs that break bridges, and the infamous Water Wraith, an invincible death machine in the submerged castle that spawns after 5 minutes per sublevel until the last floor when it can finally be defeated. These examples can be irritating when they undo my progress, but I'm trying to give some credit. Regardless, these are too infrequent to make much difference. Not to say unlimited time has no positive consequences, I actually welcome it in boss fights so I can focus exclusively on their behavior. As an aside, I always get chills reaching a cave's final floor, seeing the arena like, oh gosh, what monstrosity am I about to unleash? Without thinking ahead all the time, one learns to appreciate the moments here and now, shifting the game's emphasis onto exploration and discovery. If only there was more freedom to explore. Some treasures, like those won from bosses, contain special abilities. These range from globe pieces opening up new areas, suit upgrades to protect captains from hazards, faster movement, and whistle enhancements that widen its radius and automatically pluck sprouts. Treasure's Poco value just dictates how long it takes to reach the credits, and in the second half of the game after paying off the debt, money means nothing, potentially turning off non-completionists. Now if there was a deadline, higher value treasures could have been exciting, but because there is none, I don't care how much they're worth, only what they can give me, which makes Wistful Wilds caves disappointing when they end without a reward. Alright, I've danced around them long enough. Caves are randomly generated multi-floor dungeons with the main constants being certain set pieces, enemies, treasure, and a boss fight at the bottom. Most sport these flat, uninteresting layouts with excessive blackness and comparatively dull theming. Where the surface feels real and curated, caves come across as haphazard assortments of assets lending to an arbitrary sort of challenge. The way random generation was implemented leads to unforeseen issues, sometimes not making sense or screwing me over, like ruining my ability to collect treasure, spawning dangers out of nowhere, limiting approach options through cramped environments that also restrict visibility, or turning obstacles laughably avoidable. Players are confined to whatever squad they enter with, stressing survival and endurance, which could have been interesting if combat wasn't so basic, and the objective of hunting treasure on top of that brings other considerations. Pikmin are clearly the most vital resource, so in a backwards way I'm inclined to try everything not to use them, resorting to lame solutions. One would think that keeping players on their toes might lead to constantly changing tactics, but in my case spelunking usually plays out the exact same. I hide my Pikmin in an indent, scout out the surroundings, spawning any and all rotten surprises, kill enemies in the way of treasure by punching, then finally withdraw groups to clean up the mess, rinse and repeat for any sublevel that I am able. And with 14 of these hellholes with between 2 to 15 sublevels each, this gets mind-numbingly tedious. Mine may not be a fast or fun method, but hey, it's safe. And when everything depends on the survival of my squad, that's what matters. I trust in my ability to protect the captains more than Pikmin, with the latter being a single mistake away from dying. Heck, the upgrades for punching, defense, and movement speed almost legitimate this captain-centric strategy. I'm never sure how many of certain Pikmin types are necessary, and the forecast prior to entering caves doesn't indicate if White's sensibility will be needed. Bulbmen are a rare, fascinating way to replenish my ranks mid-cave, as they can withstand all elemental hazards. It's possible to beat a boss but not have enough units to retrieve the treasure, and because there's no way to skip sublevels upon returning, that means going through the entire cave again. The 15-minute day cycle created a nice flow of gameplay with well-defined stopping points. Caves throw off that pace completely as there's no telling how long they might take.
And then in Pikmin 2, when you go into those caves, sometimes they just last so long. You're just down there forever.
The pacing of the game feels off with the caves.
It feels like it's almost like padding. At that point.
So much about the caves is nonsensical and contradictory to what made Pikmin work. The idea of a combat or survival-based trial isn't bad, but the rules needed to adapt. When players are no longer against the clock, stuff like carrying spoils back to ship becomes padded busywork. Enemy corpses were already pretty worthless with their paltry poco value, though that didn't stop me from paying off a good amount of debt using them, but after the credits they just litter the battlefield. Caves hardly function as a course clear kind of challenge because in many cases captains can safely leave their squad to pursue the exit since they'll ultimately follow anyway, which is odd considering they must accompany the captains when entering from outside. The caves also expose Pikmin 2's abysmal difficulty balancing, which can instantly flip from 0 to 100 with not much middle ground. All it takes is one stray rock, bomb, or other unlucky surprise to decimate my army and my mood. Sublevels can be reattempted via resetting as the game saves in between each, which is a godsend when trying to maintain purple Pikmin or fish for a favorable outcome, but doesn't excuse the poor design and somewhat undermines the endurance aspect. Calling purple Pikmin overpowered doesn't begin to describe them. By pounding, they kill almost anything no problem, so assuming players have enough to spare, purples are generally best for fighting and collecting, trumping other type advantages like red's damage output and white's speed. Purples aren't a late-game commodity either. They're the second type introduced roughly 30 minutes in. The same brokenness goes for Bitter Spray, turning even the meanest of monsters into helpless jokes. With nothing to stop players from stockpiling these purple resources, the game's primary challenge can be negated, assuming they have the patience to sit through the monotonous process of obtaining them. The Doomsday apparatus requires 100 purple Pikmin, which no one will have before reaching it, so they'll probably end up going through 8 levels of the subterranean complex over and over to farm the candy pop buds there. In Pikmin 2's challenge mode, players have a predetermined squad and must scour caves in search of keys granting access to the next sublevel before time runs out, with co-op multiplayer finally allowing the two-captain dynamic to flourish, aside from the minor hassle of trying to evenly divide same-colored units. Conserving Pikmin and acquiring more treasure will net higher scores, though chasing a best score can be frustrating for a number of reasons. Treasure will be hidden from sight, requiring white Pikmin to sniff out under a time crunch, and it's not like I can remember where these treasures are for subsequent attempts because I again, randomized. It's very possible to get cheated by enemy AI, eggs spouting unfavorable nectar or mitites, and all manner of random generation bullcrap. When every second counts, I need reliability. I also hate when long challenges finish with bosses that could easily ruin my run. Luckily, this mode understands how broken sprays are and designs around them as a limited resource. After completing all 30 challenges, a cheap cutscene titled Louie's Dark Secret is unlocked, revealing it was actually him who ate the golden Pikmin carrots, meaning he's to blame for this whole thing. Perfect. Thankfully, I can beat him up in battle mode, where 2 players compete to collect either 4 yellow marbles or the opponent's marble to win, and alternate lose conditions for downed captains or Pikmin extinctions. This again utilizes the cave format and all the chaos that ensues, which granted is more palatable in a party-style setting, except for when marbles spawn next to someone's base for a huge unfair advantage. Adding to the craziness are cherries which randomly bestow powers to turn the tide of battle, though split screen kind of ruins the invisibility power-up. Overall, a welcome inclusion for the opportunity of more multiplayer, which my brothers and I did plenty of. For 10 years, Pikmin 2 was the only game I owned from this series. As a kid, I enjoyed the simple pleasures of growing 1,000 of my favorite Pikmin type, goofing around in the Piclopedia, chilling with the bread bugs in Glutton's kitchen, trapping Big Mama behind this bridge so she won't give me crap for the rest of the day, and observing the intriguing ecosystems. But I didn't fully understand the game's appeal. Playing Pikmin 1 about a decade later, it was as if a light switch turned on in my head. Everything made sense, so returning to this anytime since has been off-putting. I'm aware this analysis has read pretty negative, so I'll ask the big question. Would I consider Pikmin 2 a bad game?
No, it didn't. It did not. It did not. We did not finish the game because we were done with it and we were tired of it. It overstayed its welcome. I'm done with the game.
Yeah, probably. The prominent criticisms of the original were its short length and the stress of 30 days, and I fear this sequel addresses these concerns in some of the worst ways, by elongating itself through a problematic new gameplay pillar and removing what is arguably the foundation without weighing the repercussions. Despite sharing many core elements, these installments are on completely different wavelengths. Where Pikmin 1 is lean, Pikmin 2 is padded. Where the original is calm, contemplative, and respectful, Pikmin 2 is obnoxious and immature. It's an unbalanced mess of design compared to its predecessor. Yet when I listen to people who call this their favorite, a nostalgic part of me totally gets it. The game may not be coherent, but the satisfying moment-to-moment action remains intact, as well as the unique emotional resonance this franchise excels at. Against my better judgment, I do see merit in a more laid-back Pikmin adventure, and it's hard to hate something with this much personality, humor, and charm. At the end of the day, Pikmin 2 is still a poignant cycle of life and death, endings and new beginnings, fleshing out this beautiful world and tilling the soil for a wiser, healthier successor.